last video, you learned how to update data in the rows of a table. You learned how to do it using the set clause, where clause, and from clause while utilizing a subquery. In this video, we are going to learn how to delete existing rows from a table. To do that, we have to use the delete statement. Just as you can with the update statement, you can also use subqueries and joins in the delete statement to help identify the rows that you want deleted. When using the delete statement, you can also code the from keyword in this clause, but this keyword is optional and is usually not used. To identify the rows to be deleted, you will code a search condition in the where clause, otherwise you know what will happen. You will drop all the rows that exist in that table if a where clause condition is not specified, and this is a common coding mistake and it can be very disastrous. Many companies provide alternative options for deleting operations within their database. Some provide Boolean type columns that will soft delete data when it is set equal to 1 to prevent the use of having to run a delete statement in their production environment. So you may not find yourself using this statement very often, but the knowledge is important to have as a SQL programmer. So let's take a look at some examples on how to use the delete statement. So the first statement I'm going to write is a delete statement that removes a single row from the invoices table. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select all into invoice copy. That's going to come from invoices. And then I'm going to be selecting all from invoice copy. And once again, I've got to delete my invoice copy table. Oops, I'm sorry. I've got to drop it. And then now I should be able to create it. And then now I'm going to delete it. Right? Invoice copy. And I'm going to delete a single row. So I'm going to say where invoice ID is equal to 115. And I'm going to run this. And you see 0 rows were affected because invoice ID of 115 didn't exist. Let's select back into invoice copy and let's see, let's pick another invoice ID. Let's delete the invoice ID row 15 here. And so I'll get rid of the first one. And now you see 1 row is affected. And then if I select back in here, now you see row 15 is no longer here. Row 16 was just shifted up into the 15th spot because number 15 was deleted from the table. Now, like we said, you can also include the from clause, but it's usually not included. It's usually omitted. But if you include the from clause and you run your delete statement, it will also work. But it's common to exclude that from clause. You can also perform calculations in your where clause using the delete clause. Let's say we wanted to do delete invoice copy where invoice total minus the payment total minus the credit total is equal to 0. Well, we just got 102 rows affected. So if we did not know which rows were going to be deleted, where the invoice total minus the payment total minus the credit total were equal to 0, prior to us running this delete statement, we would have no clue what was deleted. So it's very highly recommended that before you do something like that, you select into it first. You select all from invoice copy, and then you use that same where clause where invoice total minus the payment total minus the credit total is equal to 0, and you see which result sets you're going to get. In this case, we're not going to get any because we just deleted all of them. But prior to this, we would have gotten records. And let's see the records we would have gotten. Let's come back up here and let's delete our invoice copy. And then let's create a new one. And then let's come in and select all from our invoice copy where the invoice total minus payment total minus the credit total is equal to 0. And it looks like these are the rows that we just deleted by performing this action. And so it's important to know what it is that you're going to delete before you delete it. And the best way to do that is just selecting all from that table and using the same exact where clause that you would use in your delete statement. So now let's take a look at how to use a delete statement with subqueries and joins. It's going to work very, very similar to how it would work with the update statement that we just learned in the past videos. And so it should be very easy for you to catch on. So let's try to delete statement that deletes all of our invoices for a vendor based on the vendor's name. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say delete invoice copy, and then I'm going to say where the invoice ID is equal to, and I'm going to open up two parentheses for my subquery, and then I'm going to say give me the vendor ID from the vendors table. Actually, let's use the vendor copy table, and let's say where vendor name is equal to Blue Cross. Now, as you can see, the vendor copy table that we created earlier in a previous video still exists. We didn't drop it, and we didn't have to recreate it. It is probably best to go ahead and drop it before you use it again, because if you're trying to work with a fresh copy of a vendor's table in your statements, then you want to be at a clean slate. And so I'm just going to go ahead and drop table vendor copy, and then I'm going to select all into vendors. I'm going to select all into vendor copy from vendors. There, so we recreated another one, and now we can use our delete statement. And we've got one row affected. So this just deleted all the invoices from the invoices table that had a vendor ID associated to the vendor name of Blue Cross from the vendors table. And we used our copy table to take care of that. So that's how you use a subquery. Now, let's see how we would use the same delete statement using a join instead of the subquery. We can delete invoice copy, and that can come from the invoice copy table, and then we'll join in vendor copy, and then we'll do that on the invoice copy dot vendor ID is equal to vendor copy dot vendor ID, and then we'll say where vendor name is equal to Blue Cross. If we run this now, what do we get? Now we get 3 rows affected. And why do we get 3 rows affected instead of 1? Well, I wrote it differently by mistake. Up here in our subquery 1, I said delete invoice copy where invoice ID is equal to select the vendor ID from vendor copy where vendor name is equal to Blue Cross. And so that resulted in 1. Or in this case, I said let's join in invoice copy dot vendor ID equal to vendor copy dot vendor ID. And so it's checking the vendor ID in this case instead of the invoice ID. And so that's why we got 3 rows. But you guys get the picture here. You can use subqueries and joins in the delete statement just as you can in the update statements. And you can use any of the columns returned by a subquery or a join in the where clause of the delete statement just as you can with the update statement. So that is all for this video. In our next video, we're going to begin learning how to work with data types. So if you're interested in the next video, head on over to database-tutorials.com. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. If you did not enjoy this video, hit the unlike button. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel, and see you next time.